Hello and welcome back to my humble show. This is going to be a short show. I have to go to bed, but I have a few thoughts in my head and I want to share them with you. Actually, this is pre-scripted for the most part. I'm going to be reading through and reacting to something which I wrote as of yesterday. But here's what we're dealing with. The dynamic between Donald Trump and Vivek Ramaswamy. Obviously, the Iowa Caucus took place just the other day. And Vivek Ramaswamy, who had promised people the world, turned out to be an epic failure, at least in part. But, fortunately for him, he had a backup plan, and that was to drop out immediately after having essentially told people that they should vote for him in order to save Donald Trump. Because of the inevitability of Trump being eliminated from the race at some point, whatever that means. And yeah, Ramaswamy is now endorsing Trump a little bit more directly, working hand in hand with him quite literally. There is speculation about whether or not Ramaswamy will be chosen as the next vice president for Trump, who just the other day was calling Ramaswamy fake. Make what you will of that. Right? Interesting how one moment Trump was like, "You're fake," and the next he was like, "You're great. We're going to be working together for a long time." Well, I would suggest that Trump actually likes having fake people work for him because they're okay with being fake, and therefore he can kind of keep them in his pocket. Sometimes it works the other way around. It's another one of those live by the sword, die by the sword type of things. Sometimes the fakers turn on you, but at the same time, sometimes they turn on everyone else and turn towards you over and over and over again, even if they previously called you, say, a sore loser. Just like in the case of Vivek the Snake Ramaswamy, or whatever you want to call him. Might as well call him Vivek Ramaswamy at this point, because pretty much the entirety of the Republican establishment, and therefore the Republican portion of the swamp, is now endorsing Donald Trump. Which means Vivek Ramaswamy is walking hand in hand with all of them too. And it will be especially interesting if, in the near future, or for a future, Nikki Haley, for example, even drops out of the race and endorses Donald Trump. Because then her and Ramaswamy will be, like everyone else these days, hand in hand. It's all part of the MAGA plan, apparently. I'm not on board with it, so come at me, bro. Feel free to disagree with me. Let me know in the comments below what you think, what you know. Before I go on, I'll just say that if you're a fan of Vivek Ramaswamy, you're welcome. I hope you do like, subscribe, and enjoy the ride. But in addition to being welcome here, you are also welcome to see your way out if you don't like what I have to say, to the point where you just can't handle it. I'm gonna say it regardless, because as a great man once said, using that word very loosely, we can handle the truth. You can handle the truth. That's can, not can't. Can't never could do anything. On the other hand, Vivek Ramaswamy, he ran on this notion of telling the truth. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. Great minds don't always think alike. I'm not claiming to be as great of a mind as him. He seems like a bit of a genius. But does he really mean this? Okay, let me show you what I'm working with. Let me show you what I'm looking at. Starting with something he posted today. I'm just going to give you what he said, and then I'll backtrack a little bit to a portion of the thread which I posted yesterday. courtesy of some thoughts in my head. Here's what he said earlier today, and this was in response to a post by Cernovich on X, formerly known as Twitter. I cannot see the original post because I am blocked by Cernovich for a reason which I have yet to determine. Regardless, Vivek Ramaswamy said, "I'll give Ron DeSantis immense credit if he does the right thing and drops out before the New Hampshire primary. Most of his votes will go to Trump, and we can end this primary to make sure that Nikki," whom he calls a snake, ironically enough, "and her neocon ilk never come anywhere near the White House. That's a key reason why I exited. I thought it was a key reason why you remained, until you turned out to be an epic fail in Iowa. Even more of an epic fail than Ron DeSantis, who you're now demanding to likewise drop out." So, everything he does is part of this big plan. It's part of this revolutionary plan, full of rhyme and reason. And regardless of how many times he flips the script, how many times he changes course, each time he acts like it's still a part of the plan. I mean, immediately before, and I keep using the word immediately because things keep immediately happening, immediately before the Iowa Caucus, he was making predictions, which did not play out. Now he's speaking as boldly as ever, as though he was right about everything all along. Clearly not, since his predictions haven't played out in the least. I just think it's worth noting that when someone speaks as though they believe that their own words are prophetic, and then they turn out to be so wildly inaccurate in so many ways, if they continue on making predictions, proclamations, even prophecies, in some cases, at some point you gotta view them like at least a little bit of a false prophet. Just saying. Not saying he's like the biblical interpretation of the terminology false prophet, but I wonder what kind of prophet he's looking to turn in the end, since he's all about investing his life's work. His life's work has been based around investment, and now he's investing in politics. That's where I'm going with that. And before I go on with this and read my response to what he had to say there, let me get into this thread, this portion of this thread, which I posted yesterday. I meant to add on to it, but I have been busy between work and everything else in life. So I'm just going to go with what I have so far, show it to you, and then I'll see my way out. I said this with Truth Social when it was created a couple of years ago, and I'll say it of Vivek Ramaswamy now. Labeling an entire platform or agenda truth heightens the responsibility for honesty, as it should. But personally speaking, it makes me all the more suspicious of the person who has categorically labeled themselves a truth teller. In the case of Truth Social, I understand a desire to create a platform where truth can be told, without fear of censorship. However, if the assumption is that more freedom of speech equates to more truth being told, I'll point out that the comment section beneath every relevant or irrelevant Truth Social post, namely on the former president's account, looks like a freaking bot farm. Not to mention how Trump himself posts more in the form of a troll than of a truth teller. Take that for what it's worth. As for Ramaswamy, from the first time I heard him speak, I liked him. But the more I listened to him, the less I trusted him. not simply because of a personal disposition against the repetitious use of the word truth, but because certain people simply seem more like sellers than tellers, at least to me. In the case of Ramaswamy, it could be because he was quite literally a pharma/biotech salesman who quite literally got rich, at least in large part, off of an ability to sell a service. Now, I'm not stating with certainty that he's insincere in any particular way, but people who take themselves so serious that they begin selling predictions along with or instead of products tend to rub me the wrong way. Just as history repeats itself, the salesman who once oversold Intepridine as an Alzheimer's drug, along with his former company, Roivant Sciences, with the Roy ironically representing return on investment. He has now oversold his self-proclaimed revolutionary presidential campaign only to flop and flip immediately after his first caucus. By flip, I mean he once again was able to flip the failed script and, shall I say, shift his grift. You see, he was running to save America, then supposedly to save Trump. Yet suddenly, after a few shakes of the hand of a fellow salesman, along with a conveniently collaborative business plan, he is being saved by Trump. No wonder some people wonder if this was the backup plan all along, or at least an investment returning backup plan. I'm not claiming that to be true, but considering how Ramaswamy went from being a political nobody with no record of governmental accomplishment to self-funding a run for president as Trump 2.0, to getting called fake by Trump himself, to dropping out and darn near swapping spit with Trump while acting like his press secretary and vying for a vice president position, after months of saying he wouldn't accept such a position, I'd say it's more than reasonable to suggest that Ramaswamy looks into Trump's eyes the way a puppet looks at his master. And all of that after him claiming that it was all of the other candidates who were bought and paid for puppets. By very definition of the fact that he is now campaigning even more directly on behalf of a man who demands an unlimited level of loyalty, Ramaswamy is now dancing complicitly, if not completely, to the tune of the MAGA movement. Nothing more, nothing less. And there's nothing revolutionary about that. It's just the epitome of people being in each other's pockets, in more ways than one. Trump does not equal truth. More to come. I did add one more portion to this particular thread. I'm questioning whether or not I want to read through it. I have some screenshots here of statements which Ramaswamy used to make about Donald Trump, and also about J6, which he now refers to as Entrapment Day. He used to call it a dark day for democracy. He said the loser of the last election refused to concede the race, claimed the election was stolen, raised hundreds of millions of dollars from loyal supporters, and is considering running for executive office again. That's what Ramaswamy wrote just a couple of years ago. He said, of course, he's referring to Donald Trump. That's what he said at the time. Wow. So he was criticizing the fact that Donald Trump was considering running for executive office, meaning president, way back then. But now, here he is, as you can see at the top of the screen. Hand in hand, having a heart-to-heart. They were literally whispering in each other's ears in a way which made me uncomfortable. And that's why I said swapping spit. Darn near swapping spit. He also wrote that Trump filed scores of lawsuits over various claims of fraud, but they never came close to changing the outcome of a single state, let alone the several swing states whose results he needed to overturn. That's not what he says anymore, though he puts a spin on it like he puts a spin on everything else. He also said 1/12/21 is the date, just after J6. What Trump did last week was wrong, downright abhorrent, plain and simple. I've said it before and did so in my piece. That's right, he has pieces where he has published these sorts of sentiments. And although he uses those publications, those self-proclaimed works of art, though he did have some bestsellers, since he is all for grifting, he uses them for record while ignoring the portions within his written record which say things contrary to what he says now. He'll say, read my books, and then if you quote him on some things he said about Donald Trump within his books, he just kind of bobs and weaves. Here's something else he said on Twitter, now known as X, way back when. The Capitol riot was a disgrace and a stain on the history of our country, period. Keep in mind, he now calls it Entrapment Day. I've said it in numerous interviews since then. I stand by it. That much is simple. The harder part is what we do to move forward together as a country. I don't think blame gaming is the answer. Well, that much I agree with. In fact, I agree with all of it. Just not his inconsistency on the matter, as well as on many other matters. And when he mentions numerous interviews, I'm aware of one specifically in which he claimed that he was crying on that day. That's right. The man, the legend, Vivek Ramaswamy, or Ramaswamy. He was crying on that day. I didn't even cry on that day. And I have taken nowhere near the stance which he now currently stands in. Okay, here's something else. References to him referring to Donald Trump as a sore loser, calling his fraud claims weak. So he was pretty much on board with the notion that Donald Trump was the big liar, which is fine. It's just that he did not keep that same energy. Okay, so I can be done with that. And I'll read this before getting back to my response to his tweet from earlier in the day where he called on Ron DeSantis to drop out of the race, now that he himself has done that. What I hate about politics is the apparent inability of politicians like Vivek Ramaswamy to continue fully saying what they truly believe once they've picked a lane to run in. I emphasize politician because I'm not going to pretend that a presidential candidate who has gone around for months repeating canned political talking points isn't actually politicking. That's exactly what he has been doing, but oh wait, saying, I'm not a politician, worked for Trump in 2016, so why wouldn't it work for Ramaswamy in 2024? Well, for one, because Ramaswamy isn't Trump. Though he acts like his son at this point. Again, see the screen? Seriously, though, must every politician talk like a press secretary with an agenda to sell? Ramaswamy is now on stage with a sore loser, refusing to say anything negative about him, even when Trump disowned Ramaswamy on Truth Social, a hot second before re-owning him. Ramaswamy basically just suggested that it was Trump's advisors' fault. I suppose Ramaswamy wanted to keep his foot in the door, though, considering how ready and willing he was to sit at Trump's table and trade new talking points. I, for one, couldn't help but notice how Ramaswamy's newly found love for Trump grew throughout the campaign trail to the point of repeatedly verbalizing it during events, all the while Trump saying hateful things about pretty much everyone else. I say get a room, just not in the White House. My point there was that I saw a shift in Ramaswamy's approach to campaigning as time went by. And by the end of it, he was outright saying in every one of his events, this is why we love Trump. I love Trump for this reason. He would say that when he was speaking to the public, who didn't turn out to vote for him in the end, because guess what? Like him, they love Trump. Sad to say, if you ask me. Okay, lastly, let me read this, and hopefully there are not any typos in here. I typed this out while I was at work earlier. I had a moment to spare, and I wanted to respond to what he said to Ron DeSantis. He literally tagged him saying, I'll give Ron DeSantis immense credit if he does the right thing and drops out before the New Hampshire primary. My word. This is a dude who has run on rhetoric speaking to a dude who ran on record. Unless you want to call a couple of books and other failed investments as record. My word, Vivek is such a snake. And you have to have both of your eyes tied behind your back not to see it at this point. Dude was in the race 2 frickin' days ago claiming he'd shock the world and implement a revolution by getting Trump voters to vote for himself in order to save Trump. And now he's dancing on Trump's puppet strings, demanding that DeSantis drop out and be like him, the backseat driver that he is. Oh, but you'll give him credit for doing something which you didn't even plan to do. You sound almost as egotistical as Trump. The nerve you have to act like you have a leg up on him because he's providing an alternative path when your entire strategy was to wait in the wings and claim Trump's votes once he got eliminated, according to your own predictions or unfulfilled prophecies. Now you're dancing to the tune of someone who said you were fake 5 minutes ago. Wait, that's because he wants fake people to represent him, so he can keep them, you, Vivek Ramaswamy, in his pocket. The businessman and the salesman. You're selling Trump even harder than you sold Intepridine. Look it up. Failed drug. He basically sold failed pharmaceuticals as, in this particular case, Alzheimer's drugs. And that did not last very long. He hyped it up and did not hit it out of the park. And then he made a profit. Let's just say that. Why do you think he is so rich? Why do you think he is the second richest Republican in the race? Or at least he was in the race. Because of his investing. And he'll go around the country talking about how he did succeed on other life-changing drugs, life-saving drugs, which apparently no one you know knows about or has any example of being successful in their own lives. But, you know, he would much rather talk about those unheard of drugs than he would the failed Intepridine drug, or at least failed for the purposes which he wanted to sell it for, market it for. So yeah, two big pharma guys, basically. Wouldn't you know it? Mr. Operation Warp Speed himself, and, shucks, if, Operation Warp Speed was the name of a political campaign, it could have been the name of Ramaswamy's political campaign, because that pretty much describes his campaign, Operation Warp Speed. Didn't age well, although he would argue that it did, considering he is vying for a vice presidential position at this point, walking hand in hand with his man. So maybe it did age well for him. Though a lot of people are advising Trump against picking Ramaswamy to be his vice president, and in large part because they are so similar that they wouldn't draw members of different demographics, different political demographics into their base, which might make it harder for them to win the general election. Makes sense, but I'm just sick of all the strategizing. I just wish people would do the right thing, regardless of how it affected their polling or popularity. That's what it's all about these days. The pundits who are apparently in the tank for Donald Trump, once again, well, they're all trying to make the suggestions which will most likely lead to a Trump victory. And I get it, but I'm not about winning a political victory so much as I'm about winning a societal victory, or a moral victory even. Is that too far to go? Okay. So I said here, you're selling Trump even harder than you sold Intepridine. It's like when you sold controversially conceptualized books when it was profitable to do so, and then pretended to be a forefather of the anti-woke movement. So I've heard him talk before in a way that would suggest that he was one of the ones at the front of the field, at the front of the fight, when it came to pushing back against DEI and all this woke agenda stuff within corporations, so on and so forth. But I was keeping up with that to the best of my ability, going back a few years anyways. Before that, not so much. But yeah, going back a few years, and I don't remember ever hearing about him. In fact, none of us had really heard of him until he decided to run for president. I mean, he doesn't have the base precisely because he doesn't have the record, and he doesn't have the record precisely because he hasn't really been in the political limelight. And what he did do made a lot of money, but he wasn't exactly like on the level of Oprah Winfrey or anything like that. Speaking of Oprah Winfrey, back in the day, at the end of the 90s, when Donald Trump was switching his party affiliation to Reformed Party and considering running for president, he was saying that he would like to have Oprah Winfrey as his vice president. And that's just a fun fact for you. Yeah. Anyways, back to Vivek Ramaswamy. I've heard him talk as though he was one of the forefathers of the anti-woke movement. And his example of why that's true is, well, he published pieces. He sold some books. But, they were hot topics at the time. And they sold. He was I want to say a New York Times bestseller for at least a time. I could be wrong on that. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. I don't really remember. I think his books were somewhat successful, though apparently not enough to where people like me knew who he was. But yeah, I just think it was more of a grift than anything. I don't think he was an original thinker on any of this stuff that he's now pushing. I think he kind of jumps on bandwagons, just like he's jumping on the Trump campaign bandwagon. I mean, I voted for Trump in 2020. Chances are, at that point in time, I knew more about Donald Trump than Vivek Ramaswamy did. And after calling Donald Trump a sore loser, and then shortly after jumping into the race, he has made an about face and is now head over heels for the guy. I do not trust someone who can sell their soul that fast. Always got to get that ROI, aka return on investment. ROI, of course, is the first half of the word Roivant. Roivant Sciences. The industry which Ramaswamy perpetrated and perpetuated. I know those are strong words, but I'm going with it. ROI, first three letters, stand for return on investment. And I feel like that's exactly what he's looking for. In the pharmaceutical industry, the biotech industry, he was very successful, but not as successful as he would have liked to have been. That's why it kind of failed out in the end, while he turned to profit. But, yeah, now he is seeking a political investment, clearly. You wanted to skip all of the resume building and shoot straight to the top, but I guess you'll settle for being a second fiddle, despite claiming you wouldn't. Or maybe even just another one-dimensional MAGA acolyte, hoping to work for a long time with the man who you once called a sore loser. Le loser. So yeah, on that last point, Vivek Ramaswamy, very confident man. I would argue, very cocky man. And his argument all along, until 5 minutes ago, was that he only wanted to go from the bottom straight to the top because he would not be effective in any other position in government. So basically he said, forget the vice presidential position. He wasn't going to be in government at all, like cabinet position at all, if he didn't win the presidency. So maybe he truly believed that he was going to be the president of the United States. Maybe in selling it so emphatically, just like he sold drugs before. Not like a drug dealer, but you know what I mean. He actually believed that he was going to be the next president of the United States. Could be, but fact of the matter is, it didn't play out that well. It didn't play out that way. And he immediately shifted to his backup plan, regardless of how planned out it was. Just happened to be the convenient backup plan of the day. And lo and behold, he has now backtracked on yet another thing and decided that he would likely like a cabinet position, namely the vice presidential position, because he's not exactly turning down that anymore. He's not turning that down anymore. Even before he dropped out, he was already shifting his stance on that. He was being a lot more wishy-washy on whether or not he would be a vice president or potential vice president. We shall see what happens. I'm not predicting that to happen. I think there are reasons why it would be strategically unwise, but also there would be strategic reasons to do it. And they clearly are about that life. So, ending on that note, this went on longer than I wanted it to. I'm going to call it a night now. This is the timeline in a nutshell. Salesman and a businessman. You see there. It started with Ramaswamy selling his entire campaign as the campaign of truth. Made it hard for me to trust, in all honesty. Truth, trust, and Trump. 3 words which start with the same 3 letters, Speaking of Riovant, starting with a Rio, return. Make that Roivent, not Riovant. I'm getting tired here, y'all. Roivant, not Riovant. I was like, return in on Vant? What? That doesn't work. Return on investment. Aha. There we go. Roivant, not Riovant. But, yes, Ramaswamy does reinvent himself, so that works. He said, "We can handle the truth. Don't let them lie to you." And then he kind of did that. If you ask me, he's kind of a liar. Posed for pictures here with these young lads with Save Trump, Vote Vivek shirts on. Made Trump angry. Trump called him fake. And then moments later, Trump was saying that he wanted to work together with Vivek Ramaswamy. Not just for a short time, but for a long time come. For a long time to come. So, we'll see if that day comes. Yeah, I'm tired of simping for people. Tired of simping for politicians. I'm just calling it like I see it. Feel free to disagree with me. Let me know in the comments below what you think. Well, I gotta go. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Peace.